Hello, welcome back once again to another tutorial as I want to show you on how to get your shoulder dart for your blouse. So this is the blouse which I am about to make now. I want to show you guys on how to go about this. It is a full shoulder blouse, so I want to use my shoulder dart for this blouse. So what I'm going to do first for this, I'm not going to add my sewing allowance at my nipple area. I'm only going to add my sewing allowance at my side. So what I'm going to do to get my nipple to nipple measurement, as I have my measurements in place like this, I first of all get my vertical measurement. So how I was able to get my vertical measurement was to indicate from my shoulder to bust. So I have my shoulder to bust point. So here is my bust point. Here is my under bust. Here is my half cut line. And I have my full line here. So my shoulder to bust, I have 13. Shoulder to bust is 13. I place it at exact that 13 there. My shoulder to under bust is 18. I included 0.5 inch for sewing allowance because I'm still going to join as my shoulder. So 0.5 inches for the joining of my shoulder, so I make it 18.5. And my half cut line is 2 inches from my under bust measurement. So 2 inches from my under bust measurement is 20 plus the same 0.5 inch for the joining of that other part, which is my shoulder. So I have 20.5. Then my full blouse measurement plus 1 inch for sewing allowance. Why the 1 inch for sewing allowance? Because if I joint this part and I fold this part, I have taken away the 1 inch which I have my sewing allowance. That's the essence or the reason why I made that 1 inch for sewing allowance at this down part. The joining of my lining to my main fabric and the joining of my shoulder measurements take away the 1 inch for sewing allowance. So after getting that, what I am going to do now is to get my nipple to nipple measurement. So the bust which I am working with now is a bigger bust of 49 is the bust measurement and 43 is the waist measurement. So this under bust is my waist measurement which I am going to work with. So it is still going to affect the same thing as this my under bust. So my waist measurement, which is this under bust that I'm going to work with. So what I'm going to do now is to divide my bust measurement, my bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. So my bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 give me 9.5. So my 9.5 is my nipple to nipple measurement. My 9.5 is my nipple to nipple measurement. So as I told you earlier, I am not going to add my sewing allowance as my nipple to nipple measurement. I'm not going to add my sewing allowance. So my 9.5 divided by 2 will give me 4.7. 9.5 divided by 2 will give me 4.7. So I have my 4.7 at my nipple to nipple at my bust point here. So I'm still going to put the same 4.7 right at my under bust and I take it down to my full length, 4.7. So after getting my 4.7, I am going to roll down my lines for my 4.7 from my bust point down to my full length. I'm going to roll a straight line connecting them together down to this point. So after getting my points like that, connecting it down to my full length, what I'm going to do next is to get my shoulder measurement. And my shoulder measurement which I am working with is 15 divided by 2 give me 7.5. So I have my 7.5 right here and I'm going to come down from this point by 1 inch to get my shoulder slope. So my shoulder slope, I came down by 1 inch to get my shoulder slope. So after getting my shoulder slope, the width of my neck, I'm going to use 4 inches for the width of my neck. But for this dress, I'm not going to cut my neck yet because of the work I am making. I'm not going to cut the width of my neck or anything concerning my neck yet. So you have to stay and watch the sewing video to understand it better. So after getting the width of my neck, which I am making use of 4 inches for the width of my neck, what I am going to do now, I am going to connect it together. So this is my shoulder slope, which is the 1 inch which I have here, and from there, this is my connect my shoulder slope down to my neck width. So after connecting my shoulder slope down to my neck width, I will see what I have from my shoulder, from my shoulder down to my neck with what I have here is 3.5. I will divide it by 2, which means I'm going to get the midpoint between my 3.5 to my 1, so which is giving me 1.2. So 1.2 is the midpoint between this point and this point. This is the midpoint, which is 1.2. So from this my 1.2, I'm going to connect it down to my bust point. So I'm going to connect it from this my midpoint down to my bust point, just like this. So after connecting it down to my bust point, what I'm going to do next is to come up by 1 inch, because this 1 inch now will give me an easy option to get my bust curve. So I come down by 1 inch and I go up by 1 inch. So after doing that, I have a video on how you will be able to calculate your under bust and how to create your dart for this part. So for this measurement of bust of 49, what I'm going to take for my dart at my waist now will be 4 inches. So that will create at least it will give my bust a space for it to sit, because the person which you are making for has a bigger bust, so you need a space for it to sit. So I have an explained video on how to create your darts for both smaller bust down to bigger bust. So I will drop the link of that video down below for you to go and understand on how to do yours. So my 4 inches which I'm going to take at my dart space here, what I'm going to do now is to take 1.5 at my center front, and on my side front I'm going to take 2.5, making it 4 inches. So the distance between what you are going to get from here to here, it should be at least 0.5 to 1 inch. So here I have 1.5 and here I have 2.5, making this to be, here is bigger than this by 1 inch. So you can either make here 1 inch and make here 3 inches. So that is that. So after getting that, at my full length, what I'm going to do now is to come up by 3 inches. So I'm going to come up by 3 inches from my full length line. So after getting my bust coming in by 1.5 and going out by 2.5, what I am going to do now is to connect my darts together. So from this my inner part, I'm going to connect it down to this my 3 inches which I came up with from my full length. Connect it down to my 3 inches, and from this part as well, I'm also going to connect it down to that 3 inches. Also going to connect it down to that 3 inches. So after getting my connections, like what I'm going to do next is to connect from this my under bust which I came in by 1.5. I'm going to connect it down to my bust point. So down to this 1 inch which I came down from my bust point, I'm going to connect it down to that 1 inch. So after connecting it, make sure this part is not pointy. Make sure it is, you contour it. Make sure you contour it. Then what I'm going to do from this part, I'm still going to connect it down to this part. So for this part, I am going to make sure I create my bust curve, which is the base for my bust to sit. And make sure I give it that shape for my bust to sit properly. So I went on to give it a dotted line before connecting it together, so it will be easier for me to trace out. So go ahead to connect it like this, from your under bust down to this your bust point which I come down by 1 inch. So after doing that, what I'm going to do now, I will come over to my side measurement. But before I come over to my side measurement, what I will do now is to place my vertical measurements down. So what I will do is to get my bust measurement. My bust is 39 divided by 4 will give me 12.25. So I have 12.25 here, 12.25 right here, plus 2 inches for my sewing allowance for my side. Take note, I am going to include this sewing allowance at my fabric. I did not take my sewing allowance when cutting this, so you understand what I'm trying to say. So I come over to my waistline, and my waist is 33 divided by 4 will give me 10.75. So I have my 10.75 right here. So this is my 10.75, and take note, these are my darts which I am not going to make use of these lines anymore. So just take note of this. I'm not going to make use of these lines anymore. So since I included this in my measurement to get my 10.75, what I'm going to do is to replace this 4 inches back to this spot. So I'm going to replace my 4 inches back to this spot. Then I am still going to put my 2 inches for sewing allowance at this spot as well. So after doing that, what I'm going to do now is to get my hip measurement. So my hip measurement is 52. So my 52 for my hip measurement, I'm going to divide it by 4. So 52 divided by 4 will give me 13. 52 divided by 4 will give me 13. I'm going to place my 13 at this spot. Then I'm going to come down by 2 inches for my sewing allowance. So this is what our blouse look like after connecting it together. So what I'm going to do now is to get my marks together, connect my marks together. So I'm going to connect my marks together just like this. So make sure this part is not pointy when doing it, so you can go on to blend it or give it a contouring. You want to contour it. So at this my half cut line, I still have the same thing as my bust point. So what do I have here? I have 15 in total of everything. So 15 here, 15 here, so I don't get short of what I'm doing. 15 here, so it goes like this. So after getting my measurements like that, I will come down to my shoulder measurement which I have here, and how to get my armhole measurement is to divide my bust measurement divided by 6. So my bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 will give me 9.5. Remember, it gives me 9.5 for my bust here. That is the same way you calculate it to get your armhole. So from this my 1 inch which I came down there, this is my 9.5 which I have here. So I am going to connect a straight line for my armhole. I'm going to connect a straight line for my armhole just like this. So this is my straight line for my armhole which I'm going to connect just like this. Then at this point I'm going to place the same 7.5 for my 15 which I have for my shoulder measurement. Then I connect it together just like this. So let me go ahead to connect my 2 inches which I have at this spot back together just like this, so you know where we are going to. So this spot now, I'm going to connect this down to this up, connect this as well down to this up like this. So after connecting this down to my armhole spot which I have there, what I'm going to do now is to get the midpoint from my shoulder slope down to this my 9.5. I'm going to get the midpoint. It's going to give me 4.7. So here is my 4.7. The midpoint between this part and this part gives me 4.7. So what I'm going to do now is to connect it from this my main bust line. I'm going to connect it down to my armhole line. Just like that, I'm going to connect it down to my armhole line. So after connecting it down to my armhole line, what I'm going to do next is for this my bust point. This my bust point, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. I'm going to come down by 2 inches for this my bust point, and I'm going to rule my straight line, connecting it down to my nipple measurement, which is my bust point measurement. I'm going to connect it down to this spot. So I want to create my side dart for this my shoulder bust measurement. So connect it down to my bust point. So what I'm going to do now, there is a way I normally use my front to create my back, but let me go ahead to create my back with our calculation same calculation to get my back measurement. So let me go ahead to complete my lines, then come back to you. So this is my back which I want to create like right now. So what I'm going to do now is to draft out my zipper allowance first of all. Before doing any measurement, I'm going to take 2 inches for my zipper allowance. So this 2 inches is what I always use for my zipper allowance, 2 inches, connecting it down to this spot right here. So after getting my 2 inches for my zipper allowance, I'm going to connect my lines down. Connect my lines down. So after getting my lines down, I'm going to start my measurement from this my zipper allowance. So this is the back which I want to show you on how to go about this. So this is my shoulder measurement. If you take note of, this is where our measurement is starting from. So this is my shoulder measurement, and I'm going to get my shoulder measurement is 15 divided by 2 will give me 7.5. So from this spot, now I'm going to get my 7.5 at this point for my shoulder measurement, and I'm going to come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. After coming down by 1 inch my shoulder slope, my shoulder width, my neck width rather, I'm going to come in by 4 inches for my shoulder width. Hope you understand how to get that. So after getting my shoulder width, what I'm going to do is to connect it from my shoulder width. I'm going to connect it down to my shoulder slope. From my shoulder width down to my shoulder slope, just like this. So after getting that, what I am going to do, let me use this ruler to keep this pressed down so you can see it clear. So after doing that, what I'm going to do now is to come to my bust measurement. And my bust measurement, if you remember, my nipple to nipple measurement, which I take after everything, is 4.7, which I took 9.5 divided by 2, give me 4.7. So this is my 4.7 which I have here, and 4.7 down to this full length line which I have here. Now I will go ahead to draw my straight line, or to mark out my straight line from that spot right here. So after getting my marks like that, what I'm going to do now, from my shoulder, from my neck width to my shoulder slope is 3.5. I'm going to get my midpoint 1.2. That's the midpoint between this point and this point, as I did for my other piece. What I'm going to do now is to connect it down to this spot. From my shoulder there, I'm going to connect it down to this spot like this. So after doing that, what I'm going to do for my waist parts, or this my blouse now, I'm going to use 3 inches for my waist down. So my 3 inches now, I am going to come in by 1 inch for this part. I'm going to come in by 1 inch for this part, and at this part I'm going to take 2 inches. So for my side, I am making use of 2 inches. For this other part, I am making use of 1 inch for this part. So what I'm going to do now is to come down to this spot, and I will come up by 3 inches. So after doing that, coming up by 3 inches, what I'm going to do now is to simply connect my lines together. And my lines, I'm going to connect it. I'm going to connect from this part. From this part, I'm going to connect it down to my waistline, just like this. And from this part as well, I'm going to connect it down to my waistline. From my waistline, connect it down to this 3 inches line. Then from here, I'm still going to connect it down to my bust line, my bust point which I have here. So I'm going to connect it down to my bust point, just like this. So this is my dart for my back. So after creating it like this, what I'm going to do now, remember this is my zipper allowance. So what I am doing now, my measurement is starting from this my zipper line down to this spot. That is the calculation which I am getting right here. So what I'm going to do next is to get my bust measurement. So my bust is 49 divided by 4 will give me 12.25. So from that spot now, I get my 12.25 plus 2 inches for sewing allowance. 2 inches for sewing allowance. So at my waist point is 43 divided by 4 will give me 10.75. So I have my 10.75 plus 3 inches for this part, 3 inches here, then 2 inches for my sewing allowance. Then at my hip area, I have my hip is 42 divided by 4 will give me 13. 52 divided by 4 will give me 13. So I have my 13 right here plus my 2 inches for sewing allowance. So after getting my measurements in my sewing allowance, just like that, what I'm going to do now is to come down to my shoulder and my armhole measurement. So my bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 gives me 9.5 for my armhole. 9.5. So I'll just go ahead to connect my straight line down to my armhole, just like this. But before that, make sure this is correct. I'll get my 7.5 again. Get my 7.5 here, and I'm going to connect my straight line down to that spot. So after connecting it down to that spot, I'm going to rule my straight line for my armhole. So this is my upper chest line. That is what it is normally called. Connect it just like that. So after you have gone ahead to get your armhole like that, what you are going to do now is to get the midpoint of your armhole as we did for the front armhole. Then our bust point comes like this. So these are my sewing allowance, connecting it together so you understand where we are going to. We still have a long way to go, so just stay calm and listen to what I am trying to preach to you. So from this point now, I'm going to connect it down to my armhole. I hope you are seeing up to this spot which I am showing you guys. I hope you can see up to that spot. I hope you can see what I have been doing. So connect my armhole down to my main bust point here. So after doing that, I will go ahead to cut out my front. And before I cut out my front, this is my for my side here. From this my line, I'm going to take 2 inches upward to connect it down to this point. But you're not going to leave it to be straight just like that. You connect 2 inches down to this point. Just like so. What I'm going to do now is to cut out my front first before cutting out my back. So I'll go ahead to connect from this my shoulder. I'm going to stop it at this point right here. And I'm going to slit my side dart. Down to this spot here. So after doing that, what I'm going to do now is to put this down to this my 2 inches which I have right here. So I will make sure it sits at that my 2 inches which I have right there. So it is going to be like this. So this has totally shifted. This has totally shifted our dart for this side. So let me get my masking tape. So just going to place it so you can see this my part now. I take it upward like this, and I'm going to place back my close with my masking tape to hold that spot together. So after holding this in place now, what I'm going to do from this spot now, I'm going to get back my sewing allowance, connecting my bust together, so you can see my line has totally shifted or drift away from that spot. What I'm going to do now is to connect it to meet my armhole just like this. So you can see my line has totally shifted. So this is my armhole allowance which I have right here. So what I'm going to do now is to connect it back. So from this spot now, I'm going to connect it back like this. So, and at this my center piece now, I'm going to cut this out. So make sure these lines are not straight. You go ahead to contour it to make sure it is not pointy. So, and at this my piece here, which is my side, I'm also going to do the same to make sure it is not pointy. So you can see what I have here to my side. But what I'm going to do next now, you can see we took away 2 inches. So I'm going to replace that my 2 inches. Let me trim out a piece of this my side of my back out just like this, because I want to do a replacement of this side. So what I'm going to do now is to use my masking tape to put this back in place. So because of I raised this to cover up my 2 inches, I'm going to replace that 2 inches back here because I want to get the shape of my blouse. So I want to get the shape of my blouse. So I'm going to do my shaping back. So this is not complicated. Just try to calm down, watch the video once again, relax yourself, and you will do it. It is very simple. So I just want to get my shape. I don't want it to be this straight. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to come back with my 2 inches. Which is here. I'm going to roll back my line. Which was like this. So then just connect this line to the straight. So after connecting it down like that, what I'm going to do now is to raise this part. By 2 inches, just like this. Then connect it back. So you can see what I have here. Connect it back to that spot which I have there. So what I'm going to do now is to trim this out to make sure it cross-check with the other piece which I have at the other side. So I'm just going to do it like this. So this is what I want right here. So I'm just going to do it like this. So that this my side will meet up my back, the side of my back. So after doing this, what I'm going to do now is to bring my back and trim it out as well. So for my back piece, let me take this out. So this is what I have for my side. So will go ahead to cut it out on my fabric. So this is the drafting video which I have just showed you right now. And if you want to see the sewing video, I'm going to use this pattern paper to show you on how to go about that. So I really appreciate you guys for coming to stay tuned until this time to watch on how to go about this or show that. So what I'm going to show you in the next video is how you can be able to cut everything out with your satin fabric. So let's see in the next video. Stay safe and remain blessed. Do some correction on this back pattern. So thank you for coming once again to see. In case you are seeing this in an online class, you are welcome back to the sewing. So there is something I want to correctly show you, which I made some corrections on. So you can see this is my side at the back. I went on to add paper. That is why it is very good for you to draft your pattern on paper before placing it on fabric, because something like this might come up and you want to adjust. You can be able to adjust it on your paper before you cut on your fabric. So remember, at this side, what is my center back? At my center back, I took 1 inch in for my darts. Then at my side, I took 2 inches in for my darts. So I went on to adjust it by 1 inch. So what I do is to take 1 inch in for my waist, for my center front, then 1 inch in as well for my side back. So that is what I was able to put a paper here. Then I rolled my line straight down to this point, because my first dart which I took was like this, and it will not work because this side is shooting out, and if you go ahead to sew it, there will be an issue. After sewing it, this part will shoot out from your back, and you know your back is flat, not as your front. So for you not to get this shoot out, I went on to adjust my darts by 1 inch for the both side. So if you want to do that, make sure you correct that before doing. So you can see what I did. I used my maxing tape to place with my paper, then I went on to blend my lines. So you can see what I have here. Before I went on to put my sewing allowance, as I told you, my sewing allowance now 0.5 inch all the way down, 0.5 inch all the way down. So both for my front as well for my, this is my lining. I have gone ahead to pad my lining